Hi. We're on to, hopefully, not the final part of this Composite Vilgax series, because like I said in the previous video, I would like to make 6 parts, which would basically combine everything I covered in all previous parts and some extras. But if I don't get time to do that, which I most likely won't, since I only have 2 days left on my free trial, then this part will be my final part. In the previous part I covered Omniverse Vilgax, which included Cyborg Vilgax and Melgax, as well as Vilgax's squid pets, so I'd recommend checking that out. And I would recommend checking out all the previous parts to my Composite Vilgax series before watching this one. Not like there's any specific order, but I do reference versions of Vilgax that I made in previous videos before talking about certain versions of Vilgax in said videos. So, there's that. So in this video I'll be talking about the versions of Vilgax that we see in the Reboot series. So let's get started. And the first version of Vilgax I'll be talking about is Vil. Vil is Vilgax after his powers were sealed away in the Omni-Kix prior to the events of the reboot, and is a nickname that Vilgax gave himself when introducing himself to Ben for the first time. Since Ben named his Chimera transformation Gax, because of Vilgax talking to Ben telepathically through Gax's form. So that's a power that Vil has, telepathy. Like how Vilgax in the classic could communicate telepathically with his drones and whoever was connected to them. Like how Vilgax was able to telepathically communicate to Rojo because Rojo had merged with his drones, and then was also able to talk to Ben when Ben was Upgrade, because Upgrade had upgraded or merged with Rojo while she was also merged with the drones. Except Vil's telepathy is even more specific, so it's pretty much useless, because you need to be in Vilgax's body for it to work, so that's pretty shit. Since Vil's power has been sealed, he can't really do anything. The only thing we saw him do was take his power back from Ben when he was in Gax's form via contact with the Omnitrix. Since I said that Ben's Chimera transformation was Vilgax's power, I'll talk about Gax too, since Gax can do everything Vilgax can, except lacks the experience that Vilgax has, and because of how the Omnitrix works. Gax is weaker than Vilgax because Gax also has human DNA in the mix, because the Reboot Omnitrix is when you transform with the Reboot Omnitrix, you're a hybrid of human and alien DNA, since the Reboot Omnitrix are the failsafe to prevent the alien DNA from being 100%. Gax also wears the same armor as Vilgax does, which appears to be like the cybernetic armor that Vilgax in Classic and Omniverse wears, minus the strength-enhancing pins on his arms. Chimeras in the Reboot, unlike Classic, can unravel their arms into tentacles, allowing for them to be more versatile and do more things at once. We also see Vilgax use his tentacles to traverse up mountains. Just like every Vilgax ever, Vilgax has super strength. We see this when he's able to hold back a giant beetle by wrapping his tentacles around its horns, and when Gax picks up the rust bucket. We also see that Gax can pick up multiple trees at once, and is able to throw them. He was able to also, unlike how Vilgax and Alien Force had to steal a power to use optic lasers, Gax can use them naturally as they're a natural power to Chimeras in the Reboot. They're able to turn trees to ash, and when a laser is fired at one for a couple of seconds. Like I said earlier, Vilgax is capable of everything Gax can do, but better, since Vilgax has more experience and more power than Gax thanks to not being a human hybrid. As soon as Vilgax fully appears for the first time in the Reboot after taking back his powers from the Omnitrix, he's able to beat Crab, 6-6 and Tetrax all at the same time with little difficulty, and then was able to best Forearms, which at the time was Ben's strongest alien. Forearms in the Reboot also being able to lift up the rust bucket but also throw it. Vilgax in the final part of Omnitrix was able to throw around Forearms like he was nothing, yet Forearms was still able to block Vilgax's attacks, and was able to knock Vilgax back quite some distance, with a surprise punch to Vilgax's back. However, Vilgax appears to be more consistently stronger than Forearms, also taking into consideration that Forearms lost to the Zombozo's goons, that being Frightwig, Thumbskull, and Acid Breath. In Supervillain Team Up, Vilgax teamed up against Zombozo, and we see Vilgax's ship, which looks quite different from Vilgax's ship from Classic. Not like that's a bad thing, I think it looks pretty cool. But Vilgax was able to fire his optic lasers through his ship, putting it in critical condition. Reboot Vilgax could possibly laser Classic Vilgax's ship in half if he wanted to, based off of this feat, and we see that Vilgax's lasers are also able to travel quite some distance. In Ben X's timeline, we see Forearms fighting against Vilgax as well, and Vilgax is beating Forearms up there too. But the main reason why I brought up the version of Vilgax is because he has the most impressive optic laser feed. That being, Vilgax is able to fire out massive optic lasers that are able to not only engulf the rust bucket, but completely destroy it along with Gwen and Max, who were inside it. In the movie Ben 10 vs. the Universe, we find out that Vilgax used to be Azimuth's assistant and helped to work on the Omnitrix. That was until Vilgax took the Omnitrix for himself to use for conquest. And we find out that Vilgax's power was still in the Omnitrix because of this at the start of the series. This means that Vilgax would have been able to do everything that Ben could do, and considering Vilgax worked on the Omnitrix with Azimuth, Vilgax likely knows the Omnitrix's functions. The functions that I'm referring to here is Omni-Kix or Omni-Naut, and the function that allows you to access other playlists, which Ben learned to do only near the end of the movie, meaning Vilgax will be able to turn into any of the aliens that Ben has been shown to be able to turn into throughout the series, and use their Omni-Kix and Omni-Naut forms. So Vilgax could turn into way big, because Ben was shown it to. He could probably turn into Atomics or Clockwork, since Reboot Ben has all the same aliens that Classic Ben does. Also, taking into consideration that Ben had Overflow, which is an Andromeda alien, despite not having to encounter him, meaning the Reboot Omnitrix maybe has more aliens than the Classic one does, since Ben had to encounter the Andromeda aliens to scan them because they weren't part of the Omnitrix, whereas Reboot Ben didn't. So, Reboot Ben could have Water Hazard, Armadillo, Amphibian, etc. already, without having to encounter them. And then he could go Omni-Kix or Omni-Naut, so he can go Omni-Naut Atomics or Omni-Naut Clockwork, etc. Taking into consideration that all the aliens that Ben turns into are human hybrids, and theoretically Vilgax's versions of the aliens should be stronger, not only because Vilgax is older, therefore his aliens are too, but also because his aliens would be Chimera hybrids instead of human hybrids, and humans are a lot weaker than Chimeras, at least in the reboot, so that makes sense. Also meaning that Vilgax will be able to turn into Alien X without the need to argue with the personalities that Celestial Sapiens have to deal with due to being a Celestial Sapien hybrid, which is the same deal with the reboot Alien X we see in Alien X-tinction. In the same movie, we find out that Vilgax is the one that imprinted the blueprints into Kevin's head in order for him to build the Antitrix, to later be used for Vilgax. Vilgax removed the Antitrix from Kevin and wields it himself. This allows Vilgax to turn into all the aliens that Kevin can, and all the other aliens that are in the Antitrix that we don't see Kevin turn into. And they're most likely locked aliens in the Antitrix that Kevin doesn't have, considering we saw Humongoraptor in Ben 10,010. There's a statement from Duncan Willow that contradicts this, saying that Kevin only has the 11 aliens in the Antitrix and there's no others. But that would contradict the source material, and I'm going to trust the source material over Duncan Willow's statement. I'm also not aware whether the statement came out before or after Ben 10,010. So basically, Vilgax can do everything he could do when he wielded the Omnitrix, and more, considering the Antitrix aliens have unique abilities that the other original aliens don't, like how Dark Matter has Mind Plaque abilities, and the Grey Matter doesn't. It's also stated by Duncan Willow that Kevin's Antitrix in theory could have something similar to Omni-Kix or Omni-Naut. However, the Antitrix is nowhere near the same tech level as the Omnitrix, so maybe the Antitrix lacks the failsafes that the original Omnitrix has, like how Albedo's Omnitricities in Ultimate Alien Force lacked failsafes too. However, we haven't seen any failsafes from the Reboot Omnitrix, so maybe it's possible the Reboot Omnitrix doesn't have any failsafes either. I mean, well, it has failsafes because Ben's aliens are hybrids, and Ben has the 10-minute time limit. But I mean, failsafes like removing the Omnitrix, or Ben dying, because Ben's never been in that situation. Unfortunately, we don't see Vilgax turn into any of the aliens with either the Omnitrix or the Antitrix, but he does turn into an amalgamation form using the Antitrix, which is nicknamed Anti-Vilgax. Apparently, according to Kelly Turnbull, the normal Omnitrix is capable of turning the wielder into an amalgam as well, which personally I'm not a fan of, because it's a lot cooler if it's just exclusive to the Antitrix, so that's a reference to Kevin's amalgam forms in the previous series. But let's actually talk about Antitrix Vilgax. Anti-Vilgax, I'm assuming, is meant to be an amalgam of all the aliens in Kevin's playlist. However, there doesn't appear to be any Bashmouth in the design. The wiki says that the torso is Bashmouth's, but I don't see it at all. I think it's quite a stretch. I think it resembles Crystal Fist a lot more. There's also the fact that Bashmouth is stated to be a special case that Kevin has to deal with, meaning Bashmouth is important to Kevin in some way, so maybe there's a reason why Bashmouth isn't present in Vilgax's amalgamation. Since Anti-Vilgax contains elements from Hotshot, Quadsmack, Undertow, Dark Matter, Crystal Fist, Skunk Moth, Thornblade, Vilgax, Wrecking Bolt, Bootleg, and Rush, then Anti-Vilgax has all of their abilities, but to an extent, since we know that the abilities used by amalgams aren't as powerful as when they're used by the original alien. Like with the original series Kevin, for example, he was 1/10 Heat Blast, so his attacks were only a tenth of what normal Heat Blasts were. But despite this, Amalgam Kevin was still one of Classic Ben's biggest threats, and Amalgam Kevin was always a big threat to Ben whenever he appeared, even in Ultimate Alien or Omniverse. The same applies for Anti-Vilgax. However, there were no Omnitrix wielders to fend against Anti-Vilgax for the majority of the time he was on screen, but that didn't prevent us from getting a nice display of what Anti-Vilgax can do. Anti-Vilgax has two mouths on each side of his torso that open up to release Vilgax's tentacles that he can attack with. We see that Anti-Vilgax can fly using Skunk Moth's wings, and can roll into a ball using Wrecking Bolt's ability. He can then use Hot Shot's ability on top of Skunk Moth and Wrecking Bolt's to become a fireball plummeting down. He can then use Crystal Fist's power to create ramps for him to launch himself from while using Wrecking Bolt's ability. And this was already a better display than anything Amalgam Kevin did, because Amalgam Kevin never really combined his powers or used them as combos. He just used them one at a time. He was able to fire goo from his mouth using Skunk Moth's ability and fire crystals from his fingers. He could also spin around to create a fire tornado and then use his tentacles to pull things into the tornado or spin them around as well. Anti-Vilgax is one of, if not my favourite form of Vilgax, not only because of his appearance but how his powers are displayed, and Anti-Vilgax's powers are definitely displayed better than any of the other amalgams in the franchise. I'm not up for any arguments on that because I see that as undisputable. Not only this, but with Bootleg's powers, he was able to spread himself across roughly half of the planet when we saw Earth from space, and it still continued to spread. Not sure how he was able to do that though, and that's probably one of the better, if not the best feat we have from Vilgax in the entire franchise. And then once Ben arrives back on Earth, he fought against Anti-Vilgax with Omni-Kix forearms, and he got his ass beat. Also notice how I mentioned a ton of abilities, I didn't mention Bashmouth once because we didn't see any of Bashmouth's abilities in Anti-Vilgax, so that's even more to say that Bashmouth wasn't part of the amalgamation. When Vilgax takes the Omnitrix key from the Omnitrix, he's able to access Alien V. Alien V is the Celestial Sapien Chimera hybrid that Vilgax is able to access. When Vilgax turned into Alien V, the entire planet, including the parts that he'd taken over using Bootleg, had turned red with white spots. The abilities that we saw from Alien V was the ability to alter his size. We also saw that Alien V was able to go from the size of regular Vilgax to the same size as Way Big, and he was also able to create thunderstorms. Not a lot of abilities, though theoretically, Alien V should have been able to do more than this. Alien X from Alien X-tinction was able to use telekinesis not only to pick up objects, but to prevent himself from taking damage. This made Alien X very formidable when he was fighting against all the Bens. The only times where Alien X did get hit was when he was caught off guard, therefore wasn't using his telekinesis. Every time he was using his telekinesis, he never took any damage. Other abilities that Alien X was shown to have is teleportation, levitation, shape-shifting, and the ability to travel through time and space. So theoretically, Alien V should be able to do all this too. Not only this, but Alien V should theoretically be more powerful than Reboot Alien X, considering Reboot Alien X is a human hybrid, whereas Alien V is a Chimera hybrid. Chimeras being stronger than humans, at least in the Reboot's case. That's also why Atomic X is theoretically stronger than both, since Atomic X is more powerful than a human and a Chimera. We saw that Alien V was able to fight against Waybig and was able to overpower him on numerous occasions. However, he ended up losing to Waybig in the end after taking one of Waybig's cosmic beams. In Classic, one of Waybig's cosmic beams were capable of at least destroying a small planet, considering it was able to overpower an incursion warship beam, the same beam that was capable of blowing up Pluto. Granted, Reboot Waybig isn't as powerful as Classic Waybig, since Reboot Waybig isn't a full Tuku star. But that's it for the versions of Vilgax that we see in the movie. Wait.
What the? Ben, what did I turn into? Ben, this doesn't seem like the aliens you turn into when you do the Omnitrix. What's happening here?